In The Fugitive Kind, a drifter gets a job at a small town store and forms a relationship with the lady who runs it, but her spiteful husband conspires against him. Marlon Brando stars as Snakeskin in her first film of Sidney Lumet's season. Let's dive in. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I'm going to show him how lewd a lewd vagrant can be.
This is a movie podcast, and we are starting off a new season on the Collector's Cut today. We're going into Sidney Lumet's season. We're going to do 7 films from him, from his sort of earlier chunk of his career. That said, it is worth mentioning that one of his films from the 50s, arguably one of his most famous films, 12 Angry Men, we actually did already as a Patreon show at one point, but that will be public by the time this first episode goes out. So if you want to go back and check out our thoughts on 12 Angry Men, you can do that. It's definitely one of the few movies of his that I had seen before and knew that it was a director that I wanted to explore a bit more of. That and Dog Day Afternoon are the ones that really stick out. We won't be getting to that this season, though. We're not getting to the 70s. We are deep into the 60s, and actually I think the last 2 episodes are the start of the 70s, but we don't get to Dog Day Afternoon. Yeah, so we're going to go through roughly in order. Not every movie by him. In fact, we couldn't even if we wanted to. There's at least one movie that I had on the list to do that when I went to go see, can we watch this anywhere? It was basically impossible to find. So. And there's a few of his old movies that are hard to find. But luckily, I think we've got most of the big ones from this part of his career. And we'll go through and we'll see how it shapes up. What are you smirking about?
I just imagine that we do end up managing to find one of those. And then the algorithm's like, what? Why would anyone care? No one's seen that movie.
Well, because it's not available. It should be available. We need the Criterion, Arrow, all these other boutique labels. Get on it. Go get remastering and give us the rest of these movies, please.
I was going to say, it's not available streaming. Does Criterion not release it either? I feel like they release a bunch of his stuff.
A bunch of his stuff, but not the one that I was looking for, I don't think.
Okay, fair enough.
It seemed to be... I don't think there's any HD version of it, certainly. So... there's just some old movies that have just not gotten that treatment yet until some label, gets a hold of it and puts in the effort. So here's hoping that eventually, maybe one day when we've went through the 2 or 3 Sidney Lumet seasons in order of what's available, one day there'll be all these other things have been remastered and are released now. We can go back and do a fill-in kind of season. But hey. Anyway, today we're starting with a 1960 film. It's called The Fugitive Kind, and it stars Marlon Brando, so we got a really big star of the era in this one as well. Knew nothing about this before I went looking to see what Sidney Lumet had directed after 12 Angry Men. And because 12 Angry Men was basically his first non-TV movie, I think. Everything he had before that were all TV movies. So we're still kind of... It's kind of wild that his first movie, feature theatrical release was 12 Angry Men, because it's an all-timer thing, it's one of those big classics, but which almost puts a weird expectation on everything he does after that. So we'll see how he lived up to it in 1960 with The Fugitive Kind. None of this was the next thing he did. Like I said, there was a couple of hard to come by movies in between there, but anyway, that's what we're going to talk about there. The basic premise of this one is that Marlon Brando plays kind of a musician, kind of, traveler, doesn't really lay down his roots. Yeah, drifter's maybe a good word, yeah. And he ends up in this small town and kind of spurs up a relationship when he tries to get a job at this store. And the characters of the local townsfolk obviously play a big part in it, and it kind of goes down a path where, some want to welcome him, some do not want to welcome him. And I'll just kind of leave it there in the spoiler-free section. But we will start spoiler-free. We'll give you warning before we get into the spoilers. And if you're enjoying the show on YouTube, please do hit the like button or give us 5 stars on the podcast app. All that stuff helps out a bunch. And as well, of course, as supporting us financially over at Patreon or via YouTube membership. But I'll tell you more about that and the bonuses you'll get at the end of the show. So, I hadn't heard of this, and not to be presumptuous and just assume that I know more about movies than you, but I'm going to assume that means you didn't know anything about this one.
I knew about all of its parts. So obviously I knew Sidney Lumet as a director. I know Tennessee Williams as a writer. He was the one who wrote the play was based off of. Marlon Brando, obviously know him. So collectively, I know everything else going into this, just not the movie itself. Not at all.
That is That's fair. Yeah. Yeah, like I say, I knew, and even some of the other like actors in here, I recognized, the sheriff character. That's R.G. Armstrong. He is definitely popped up in at least the Twilight Zone or two. But I think the main thing I know from when he's much older is he is in Predator. He is the colonel who gives the mission at the start of Predator. So I was kind of like getting flashbacks to him. And his wife in this movie, I was like, what do I know her from? I know her from something. Turns out she was in Airport, and immediately it clicked. Yes, I know her face from Airport. So.
Oh, okay, yeah.
She was the
Fair
wife
enough.
of the culprit in Airport.
Right. Fair enough. All right.
Yeah.
So I guess I've seen her too.
Yes. My memory apparently is just a little bit better than yours.
Oh, my memory is garbage. Anytime that you're like, hey, I want to do something where we like go over all these things from Collector's Cut or Ace, I'm like, I don't know any of those things anymore. They're gone. What are you talking about?
So yeah, it's got a hell of a cast and all that stuff, but we'll get into it. We'll see our initial feelings and then go from there. David, what did you think of The Fugitive Kind?
I think this movie is just fine. I look at it again as a sum of its parts. I look at it where the acting is good. I don't think there's really anyone who delivers a poor performance. There are some people giving great performances. I think the acting's very good. Cinematography, directing wise, it feels like it has a lot of flair. It does a lot of like long shots, which of course were more normal at the time back then. That was just kind of a way you did things, but it still feels like it went in with a purpose and it was trying to get a visual flair, especially as we approach the ending. There's a lot there in the ending bit. The script, the writing, I really do enjoy Tennessee Williams' style of writing. It's very naturalistic. It feels like actual conversations. And then when it does delve into the more abstract sort of ideas that people are talking about, it feels very, I don't want to say natural there, but it feels very believable that somebody could say that in that situation. However, I just couldn't get into this. I feel like the main focus of this movie, the primary thing I'm supposed to get out of it is the chemistry between the two leads and how that like keeps going throughout. And I just never got it. It never clicked with me. And so as we're continuing down the movie, I just kind of felt detached the whole time. And by the time it hit the end, it has a thrilling ending. I appreciate where it gets to, but it's still just never quite clicked with me. So it's a fine movie. I can recognize that it's got good quality behind it, but it just never really got to me on a level where I was emotionally connecting with it and like really feeling things for the characters as they went through them.
Interesting. I think I may be a little bit more positive than you because I think I'm a bit more than it's just fine. I think it's very well directed, which is not surprising. It is in Lumet. I do think that the performances are largely very good. I think it's got some, there's like kind of themes that kind of unfold as the movie plays out, which I think are handled quite well. I like that there's just like a couple of subtle hints early on that get a lot more in your face when you get into the third act. It felt like, oh, you kind of teased us a little bit earlier, and I like kind of now feeling that we're really getting into the deep of it. I think the main character, and this is very much in many ways a character study of a movie, there's a little bit of a mysterious quality to him in some ways of exactly what makes him tick, and I think kind of exploring the main character, the main two characters really, and seeing kind of what motivates their decisions and what they're denying about themselves, I think is handled quite well. What's funny is probably the thing that I'm going to maybe critique a little bit more than you did is I do actually think when it gets into abstract monologue territory that it was pulling me out of the movie a little bit. Because it's like, it's fine when it's doing the more naturalistic stuff where it's just like conversations and whatnot. But once they start speaking like more in like metaphors and like whatever, or Marlon Brando's doing his serious monologue, it did feel a little bit like, okay, now serious Oscar contender Marlon Brando is going to do his monologue, and like he's going to act the shit out of it. But I just feel like I'm watching Marlon Brando do his monologue because it's going to look good on a showreel, as opposed to it like a believable conversation in the movie. And there was only two or three times it really went into that territory for me. But whenever it did, I'm like, oh, like we've stopped just doing a movie and we're doing a movie. like we're, it's a weird thing to describe, but like it kind of like went into this layer of, okay, we're doing this. This is almost like, this is the equivalent of like the needless action scene in an action movie just to show off their effects. Like, we're going to let Marlon Brando just show off his acting, even though I don't necessarily think that what he's saying feels like it really is needed for the movie, or you know, is a bit too grandiose. It's a bit too speechy for the moment at hand. But you know, I mean, it's not like a huge complaint, but it did take me out of the movie a little bit a couple of times. I'll say that.
That's fair. I mean, I think that's something that I've watched a couple Tennessee Williams things, the things that are specifically adapted from his plays, because this was a play originally. I feel like that just is kind of the theater bleeding through. And obviously you have to make adaptations and changes to make it an engaging movie. I don't think it should be adapted just one-to-one, but those sort of monologues and stuff like that, those are hard to adapt over, because on the stage they are essentially replacing the action scene, as you're saying it, that sort of thing, where it is something that's just of the genre that allows you to get into what this movie is more about. And so when it's doing those sort of monologue bits, it's kind of just saying, here are the themes that we can't do because visually we don't have as much control over the stage. And so it's something that probably should have been adapted a little bit more differently when they got to film. But yeah, I can see what you're saying, where it just kind of seems like, oh, I took this role because it's going to look great on the reel after the fact. I'm going to be able to really make it pop.
Yeah, but I mean, other than that, I do think that the movie has like a good antagonist. I kind of enjoy how the antagonist is a part of the story, and how it's, you know, in a lot of ways he's just in the background for large stretches, but like I think the imposing and the idea that he's always there, and it's we're kind of counting down to the impending kind of consequence of like him getting in the way of things, I think is quite good. Like I think that stuff is actually quite exciting at points. So yeah, I would say it's good. I obviously, you know, when I'm comparing it to the other Sidney Lumet films that I know already, like 12 Angry Men and Dog Day Afternoon, obviously, yes, I don't think it's as good as either of those two, right? By even like a reasonable margin, in fact. But I still think it's good. Like, it's like, if this is like, I mean, obviously there's definitely movies that, some of the ones that are hard to find, admittedly, but like some of them are quite like middling rated on IMDb. Not all of them, but a few of them definitely are. But if this is kind of the lower tier of like what's available from him, like I feel like this is like a really good floor, because everything's really confident. Everything's handled with such sort of like craft. Like you know, we spend a lot of time, and it's not surprising that it was a play to begin with, because like a lot of it takes place in this one set. I mean, there's other scenes that go other places, but a lot of it's taking place in this store is kind of our main stage. And I think I was never bored of being in that store. And that's a sign of really good direction, because he's constantly making use of the space, and you get this sense of the upstairs, the downstairs, the back where all the shoes are, the front where this is, and then outside there's this area that's going to be turned into something later on. All of it felt like you're really getting a good sense of the geography, and whenever they're having these debates in here, because there's, you know, someone else upstairs, this is sort of like wrench into the plot, if you will. There's always kind of a tone to the location, like an atmosphere to it, despite the fact that it's just a store. And that's a really good handling of your space in a movie, I think.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I did want to comment on the idea that you're saying, where if this is the floor of Sidney Lumet, and that's kind of what I was saying with the parts aspect of it, is that this is a movie directed by Sidney Lumet, written by Tennessee Williams, starring Marlon Brando, like at his prime, at like pretty close to his peak in terms of acting stuff. And like, it's hard for me to believe that a movie with that much extra caliber behind it can really be bad. Like the fact that I didn't care as much as I did kind of did surprise me, because it does have that much star power going into it that it feels like it should just be a no-brainer.
Sometimes that happens though, where you get like an all-star cast and an all-star director, but it ends up being like one of the weaker things in all of their resumes. It's like everyone just assumed this will be perfect because everyone involved is perfect, but you know, then and I don't think that necessarily applies here. I like I say, I think it's a bit better than maybe you seem to, but I did get invested in, maybe not so much the romantic part of it per se, but more in kind of what it says about their characters and what they're looking for in the world. Because ultimately the title, The Fugitive Kind, is about what type of person the main character is and how he doesn't really fit into a lot of the world. And that's kind of the main driving force. But hey, That's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the big thing though for me. Like you said, when it comes down to the Brando stuff and how he fits in the world, yeah, I enjoyed all that. I don't want to lay it all at the feet of the lead actress. I think that she gave a good performance. I just feel like it was a different kind of performance than everyone else in this movie was kind of like going for. It just felt like there was, again, nothing wrong with it, but just the chemistry, the way that Brando was playing this very much more reserved kind of aloof character. And there's another actress in this movie who, honestly, when she was introduced, I thought she was going to be the opposite character of Brando. And she felt much more fitting, much more of like his opposite, and still being able to show that level of depth later on in the movie. And when we finally did end up with the character's name is Lady, she felt fine, she felt good, but she felt like she was in a completely different style of movie, a lot more, not in quality, but a lot more of like soap opera, sort of like over the top dramatics, rather than Brando's much more reserved sort of style of acting.
I would just say you hate Anna. That's fine.
I don't, but I don't. That's the thing.
The actress's name is Anna, which is just amusing because David's fiance is named Anna.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is why I was making that joke. I mean, and she is, when you click on her name, she is mostly in Italian movies, and she does have an accent. So clearly, I wonder if part of what you're recognizing in the performance is maybe, if not a difference in styles between, like how she would act in like Italian productions versus American productions. It may just simply be because she has a thick accent and she's kind of working through that she's, trying to compensate by, making clear how she's feeling in ways that are going beyond like little enunciations or whatever.
Yeah, possibly. I feel like when it comes down to the chemistry, I feel like Marlon Brando and Sidney Lumet, who obviously have worked together prior to this, they have a history. I feel like they understood each other. They knew what they wanted there, but I don't think that when it came down to her character, it was quite as much of an understanding.
Interesting. I mean, I think it works that she feels a bit different to him, because the kind of the point is that she is different. She is, she's this, she's more middle-aged. She's in a different place in her life. Whereas the other female character, Carol, who you kind of brought up, is kind of this other free spirit. And it's almost kind of like the type of person that Valentine, the main character, is trying to get away. Which, by the way, Brando's character's name is Valentine Xavier, which is the most like over-the-top name you could probably pick for someone. But,
and his nickname, he has a snakeskin jacket, so his nickname that people call him is Snakeskin as well. So no matter what they're calling him, it's a completely outlandish, crazy name.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like this is like a starring vehicle for him, and that we're going to like, he's going to be this coolest guy and everyone's going to know he's cool. The townsmen are going to be jealous of how this cool young man's here. Even though he literally at the start of the movie says, "Oh, I'm not young anymore, I'm 30," and she's like, "30's not on." I'm like, "Yeah, 30 isn't old, dude. Come on now. Let's not say ridiculous things." But you're also like 30 or plus.
I feel old when I think back to like, oh God, I used to be 20. That was forever ago.
Well, it wasn't. When I think about what movies came out when I was 20, I'm like, wait, they're not that old. They just came out. What are you talking about?
I love how every single aspect of your life is like, yes, that's when that movie came out. I remember that.
It's an easy way to gauge time, all right?
It is. Yeah, you're right.
It's an easy way to gauge time. Yeah, I mean, I think the movie is pretty good, but obviously there's a reason why it's maybe not been as remembered as some other big Marlon Brando movies or some other big Sidney Lumet movies, but I think it's a solid entry. Like, it's a solid, well-made movie with a compelling set of characters that maybe just doesn't add up to as much as some of their other movies. Doesn't quite have the same punch ultimately by the end, but yeah, by no means is it a slouch, I think. I mean, I kind of get maybe not feeling the romance and then therefore not feeling as invested in the rest of it, but bizarrely, like, I don't even think it's the romance itself that I was particularly invested in. It's more just the idea that both these characters are kind of in a world that they're kind of trapped in, and they're both trying to get out of them, and they both kind of represent that to each other in a sense, but like the romance itself is not the part that's exciting to me. It's more just kind of what it says about both of them individually, but
with the movie completed, yes, I agree with you. I do think that that's what it is. But there is a shift towards the middle where it does feel like they are kind of just leaning on the fact that the romance is something that is an escape within its own right. And we spend a good amount of time just focused on them kind of being happy with that. And that's where I started just being like, but I don't feel like it. I don't feel like that's what it is. And by that point, the movie just felt like it was slouching for me the whole time.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I didn't really feel that, but like, it's not like I have a particular like strong counterpoint to it. I just didn't feel that.
It seems like we're both basically in this sort of non-strong feelings, but whereas I'm coming down with it's fine, you're coming down with it was pretty good, and it's just arguing over the minutia more so than anything else.
Yeah, well, we'll probably get into the spoilers here in just a second so we can start discussing it properly. Is there anything else you would like to bring up before we hit the spoilers?
I mean, I know it's not everybody's bag, so just be aware if you do want to go check this out. It is black and white. It is
don't give people that warning.
I know, but it is something that I've had people complain about before to me whenever I recommend like good movies from that past era. They're just like, why didn't you tell me it's black and white? I was bored. And I was like, God, you're the worst kind of person.
Look, if you don't want to watch a movie because it's black and white, stop listening to this podcast and go away. Okay, that's.
I was gonna say Sidney Lumet season might be a bit of a problem for you.
Right, like suck it up, get over it, watch some good goddamn it. Go watch 12 Angry Men and like pretend for a second that it being black and white is in any way a detriment to it. Come on, shut up. Like
they much prefer the 90s version of Psycho over the original. Those people. Look,
I'm not tolerating. I'm not pandering to people who won't watch black and white movies. So retract that warning.
Fair enough. Okay. It's in color, everybody. Check it out, no matter what.
Okay, spoilers for The Fugitive Kind. You have been warned. So there's a little bit of like a prologue section to the movie, which is just interesting the character, and he's like in the tank at the jail in whatever town he's in to start with, and he basically just gets to have it's effectively a monologue. Like, occasionally there's like an off-screen character like trying to ask him, like a police officer, okay, so what happened at this party? Why are you arrested? You know, it's like a judge or whoever is talking to him, and it's very vague as to what actually happened at this party and why he was arrested. I feel he doesn't really go into detail. He says he was disgusted by something, so I'm like, did you get into a fight? Like, at one point I was even thinking, was it an orgy? Were you a male prostitute? Like, it never really like actually implies much of that for the rest of the movie, but there is generally a sense of whenever his backstory comes up, it's usually Carol, that other female character, who brings it up and talks about his past. But even when he's talking to like the wife of the sheriff, he's like, oh, I was like an entertainer, you know, I played my guitar at parties. Even she's like, would you want to turn over a new leaf? Like, I'm like, a new leaf from what? Whoa, what's playing guitar at a party going to do with anything bad?
This is back when rock and roll was the devil's work, Pete.
Apparently.
You can't just go around doing that. I agree, though, in that it feels like on the surface, it's very clear with what it's saying. It's saying like he was invited to do music at a party. He saw something. He doesn't say what, but he ended up roughing up some people at the party, and that's why he got arrested. But anytime anybody talks to him with mention of like his past or whatever, they always put a weird emphasis on the word entertaining. They're always like, oh, well, yeah, you have a history of entertaining. And I'm like,
a stripper?
Is this Magic Mike? Are we doing Magic Mike? Like, I don't know what this means, but he has his guitar throughout most of the movies, so I feel like that's what it is. It's just a weird emphasis.
Yeah, I was struggling. It's almost like, in a weird way, maybe this was more obvious at the time because this is the sort of thing you could just imply, but maybe because we were modern people in the context here of watching this in 2025, where I'm like, because they're being vague about it, it's making it harder for me to understand. I'm like, just say he's a stripper, if he's a stripper.
Right.
Like, I don't know, it's bothering me.
Or like if it is a mystery, like have the reveal come at the end. Do whatever you need to do here, but it genuinely feels like we're just missing the double entendre of whatever it ended up being back then.
Yeah, and if that is what we're saying here, if he was some kind of stripper, right, some sort of musical nude act or whatever he was doing,
right?
The idea that there's this much stigma over it makes sense in the time and frame, and especially since this town are very racist. It turns out by the end of the movie, it's not surprising they would have an attitude about it, but that would also sort of tie into kind of those ideas of like these values, these old school values, and how judgmental everyone in the town is, and all that kind of stuff. So it does kind of fit. It's just, like, because obviously like, this idea of like, that's not let's not like demonize sex workers is kind of like a modern thing that at least reasonable people will try and say, but this is very much a town that, as we find out, had lynch mobs and things like that as the movie goes on.
Oh yeah, no, they're the absolute worst. And that's also kind of the thing that I wish we would have gotten more of in this town, is that it does feel like a play being adapted, in that it feels like there are about 7 characters, and those are of course the characters that would have been on stage at any point. You wouldn't have had the ability to just go through everybody in the town and meet up with all these people on stage. So I feel like the adaptation to screen, I would have loved to see a lot more of the town, and specifically a lot more of like just how bad they are in modern sensibilities in terms of the times are a changing sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does a good job of like teasing things early on, like, when Marlon Brando's car breaks down and he ends up chapping on the door of what turns out to be the sheriff's wife in this town, but I think it's called Twin River County. She invites him in because they've got like a jail cell in their base. That's like how small this town is. There's not a station. They just have the jail cell in their basement. And
which, sheriff is an elected position. What happens when he gets voted out? What happens when he loses his job?
Well, it's like 10 Downing Street or the White House. He has to move out. This is the sheriff's like designated house, you see.
Gotcha. That actually makes more sense. I'll take it.
I mean, it would be funny though if the White House, like every president who was still alive, like still lived there. Like they never have to move out. They just keep getting added to like the other wing.
God, can you imagine? That is a great sitcom idea, just for that transition between the Biden-Trump years, where it's Trump is still running around and now Biden's still there for Trump years, and it's just chaos all the time.
Oh dear. But yeah, she mentions that someone escaped from the jail cell earlier that night and her husband's out looking for them. But she invites him in, offers him some coffee, and she's kind of flustered because this other guy ran away. And it's obviously at this point in the movie, we're not really like, we're still trying to gauge who this guy is. We're still trying to gauge, like, is he someone that she should be more, not that I thought he was going to do anything really bad to her, but just, is he untrustworthy? Is he someone that we should be skeptical of as an audience?
Like we literally just saw him telling his story to a judge or a cop or whoever. So we know that he is in trouble with the law to some extent. So you also get this idea of, he just showed up in the sheriff's house uninvited. Is he going to be in trouble as well? Like, what kind of town is this that, like, maybe the sheriff's going to come in guns a-blazing?
Yeah, and obviously he did say that he would never go back to a place like that when he was speaking to the judge, and he's like, oh no, I'm, starting off anew, I'm leaving this town kind of thing. Which does seem to be true as the movie goes on, but again, we don't know how true it is at the start of the movie. Right. But he, he talks to the woman a little bit, and she's like, hey, if you're looking for a job, like, there's this owner of this store in the main street who just got, like, sick and injured, and he'll probably need new help. He'll probably need someone to do a lot of the work because he won't be able to do it himself anymore. Maybe you can get a job there, and that kind of leads to the next scene. But before we go there, though, the sheriff and his, like, I don't know, deputies, I guess, come back, and they have killed whoever ran away, right? We actually hear that at one point. We hear a gunshot, and we hear, like, and Marlon Brando's like, I think they got him. And it's just kind of like, and it's like a tease of, like, this is how they deal with their problems. And when the sheriff comes in and sees Marlon Brando sitting there next to the cell, he goes upstairs and he's like, who's that boy that's down there now? And it's like, it doesn't really go any far, but there's just kind of like a little sentiment of, oh, I don't trust him. Like, he's an outsider. It reminds me more than anything else. I mean, there's lots of stories where there's like an outsider comes into a small town, and the small town are kind of like really shut off and bigoted and don't want to trust them. I think the thing that made me think of the most though was the start of First Blood, when Stallone's like coming in through the town, and the sheriff's just immediately like, I'll drive you out of town. You really don't belong here. Like, off you go. There's kind of a little bit of that vibe as the movie's going on.
Oh, yeah. I also really like this intro bit because it shows a little bit of just like a changing of the mind, at least for the wife character, where she describes as this guy basically pushed his way out of the jail cell because she was trusting him too much. He said, "Excuse me," as he pushed past her. And that little tiny bit of like, he had manners while he was technically breaking out of jail. Like, it just sits with her that now that guy's dead. Like, he was shot dead in the field outside her house. Like, that sits with her to some extent, to the point where when she's talking to her husband later on, she kind of just gets flustered. And when he's asking for the name of the person, just like, Xavier was his name. She's like, no, not that idiot, the other idiot, the one we shot just now outside.
Yeah, and they also seem quite proud of themselves. Oh, we got him. Like, we shot the filthy criminal. That's fine. Like, good job today. We can pat ourselves on the back. And it really does paint a picture of like what their attitude is. And the wife is probably like not in the support of how they act, but she's kind of trapped here, because that's a big theme of the movie, is people been trapped in the worlds that they just happen to be in. Just to skip ahead a little bit and just sort of talk about that metaphor, like this idea that there's two types of people in this world: the people who can buy and the people who are bought. But then he's like, there's a third kind, and he doesn't say it. It's not until the end of the movie another character says the fugitive kind, but that's kind of what it's saying, is that there's people who don't really, they're the drifters, the ones who don't belong into either of those camps, who are kind of looking for their place, and that's what he is ultimately. That's what the movie's about. So yeah, so opening sets all this stuff up, and then we go to the store the next day, and she's introducing him. And this is where we get introduced to a whole bunch of characters. There's a bunch of like ladies who are standing around talking, which is good for exposition, because they talk about, oh, this man's sick, and when the owner comes home, was it Jabe was his name? He's taken upstairs, and he can barely walk, and they're like, oh, he'll never come back down. He's going to be up there in that bed with the death sweats until he dies. And the thing is, though, is that he's kind of insufferable immediately, but the big thing that really like thematically told you what type of character he was going to be and what the relationship between him and his wife is, his wife named Lady, is that he basically just stomps on the floor with his walking stick whenever he wants something, and it's this impending like doom almost of like, she's like, I must go, he needs me kind of thing. And she doesn't look happy about it. She looks like she's exhausted, she looks like she's miserable in this marriage, and she's going up. So it's like, okay, he's sick, but he's this spiteful old piece of shit who will get jealous. I mean, in some ways maybe he's right to be jealous of some things, but he is going to get jealous instantly. He's going to assume things are up, that his wife's up to no good. The second that she's out of sight, he's going to be this overbearing presence, literally, because he's above the entire time when they're in the store. That's what I was talking about earlier when I was saying there's this great atmosphere in the store, because he's always up there, and he can stomp on the floor at any time to interrupt any kind of intimate moment that might be happening, or any good conversation that's happening. And that's kind of what we establish here right up front with this return from the hospital.
Oh yeah, no, I really like this scene from an expositionary standpoint. It does a great job of setting up, okay, here's who this guy is, here's the owner of the, well, he's the owner of the store, but Lady runs the store while he's up and sick. And you get also the sequence where he gets her to come up and essentially like assaults her before anything else has even happened. Like, this isn't a thing where she's already been flirting with other guys or whatever. Like, she gets assaulted and basically says like, yeah, I never enjoyed being with you, and the sooner you die, the better, all things considered. And so you get this magnanimous hatred between the two of them immediately.
Yeah, and that's before we even get to her backstory and the possible ties that he has to it, and things get even worse from that point. So, but during this, we also get introduced to Carol, who is this kind of, this blonde woman who sort of drives in this beat up old car, and comes in with this homeless man who happens to be black, which in the moment necessarily wasn't that important, but obviously later on when we find out what the people in this town are like, it becomes a lot more thematically relevant.
I mean, thematically, yes, but when you say later on, she literally brings him into the store, and one of the ladies is like, get him away from me! Oh, God!
That is true, that is true. Like, there is like an over-the-top reaction from one of the ladies, but she thinks he's like a witch doctor, that he's going to put like a spell on her or something. It's like superstitious bullshit. But it sets that up here. But the big thing is that she's been told she's not allowed to be here, right? And that seems to be like not just a store. It feels like the whole town's like, no, you're barred from here. You're not supposed to be here because we all hate you, because you cause trouble. That's all you are. And I almost felt like obviously she goes over to Marlon Brando as he's standing there waiting to talk to like Lady or the boss about getting a job, and she goes over and says, "Oh, I recognize you," and that gets us on our plot path here a little bit with these characters. But I think in a larger sense, as she's talking to Brando, it kind of felt like to me that in some ways she represents the world that he is trying to leave behind. That's kind of like what comes up, and not so much that he acted exactly like her, but in this way that she goes into these places and they all say you're not wanted here. It kind of feels like that's the life he's been somewhat living to an extent. Obviously, it's a little bit different because he's an attractive guy who's a lot more calm, so he gets kind of welcomed by the ladies a lot more, which is also why the husband's going to get jealous very, very quickly. But it does kind of feel like she's constantly trying to pull him into let's go to juke joints, let's go drink, let's go do these things. And it kind of feels like this is the sort of thing that he would have done in the past. Like he would have went to these places, he would have just partied all night, and he's kind of trying to grow up a little bit, you know?
Yeah, well, part of the backstory that she mentions is that she says, "Hey, I bet I can guess your wristwatch," because turns out that he stole it from someone that they shared a party with together. Yeah, something like that. And so they do actually, it's not even someone who is like her. Like they were running in the same circles, but he's like, "No, that's not me anymore. I'm not doing that." But I agree with you. It does feel like it's a character from the past. What got me though, and what I think it would have been good to continue down this a little bit, is not only does it allow for an evolution and a deep dive into her character, which I think is just super interesting, because we get a little bit of her later on as she gives her backstory, saying that she was like a protester. She was all about like equal rights for Black people. And then kind of slowly that life was given up because she was just pushed out of everywhere. She wasn't able to do the sort of protesting she needed to. But you can see that there is this underlying sadness in the way that she is covering it up with all of this partying and whatnot. She's like, there's something deeper to her where you know that she doesn't want this either, but it's literally the only life she knows. And it would have allowed for a great dichotomy of, you have this guy who's also trying to escape it, but is just given more opportunities. It's just a little bit further ahead than she is. And how would they possibly be able to help each other throughout that?
Well, I think the point of her first kind of chunk here is that she basically says, "Hey, my car is having trouble. Will you come out?" And he kind of says no, and is maybe it may not even say it verbally, but he does ultimately choose to go out to the car. And I actually thought there was a moment here that was like super suggestive for a movie from 1960.
So much.
Because this wouldn't even faze me in a modern movie, but like he gets in the car on the driver's side and she's shuffled over to the other side, but her legs are kind of like reaching over to his side. And he's like, "Hey, you'll need to move your legs to the other side of the gear stick." And she just moves one leg. So the gear stick's in between her legs and her legs are kind of open, and she's sort of looking at him with the eyes. And he's like, "And the other one." But like, it is a super it's obviously you don't see anything, but this is like, this is like a precursor to Sharon Stone in Basic Instinct. This is like, just a little bit, toned down a few notches, but it's definitely on the same track of where we're going with that. So
I noticed that this movie was not put before the MPA. This was back when they had the Hays Code, because it says approved. So obviously there's a few things toned down, but I'm sure that if this was released at the time, this probably would have been like rated R for highly suggestive content.
It's so weird, actually. Well, I don't know if they had that yet. I think that's the point, right? But yeah,
right. But that's what I'm saying. If the MPAA was a thing, this would have been an R-rated movie at the time.
Well, what's so weird is that the MPAA don't need to rate movies that are released on like home formats, whereas in the UK, the BBFC who rate stuff, like everything that gets released at home has to be rated as well. So even old movies before the current system are still have ratings in the current system because they have to. It's just a legal thing.
Okay.
So it's just kind of funny to me that there's all these old movies that have never been rated by the MPA because they don't have to go back and do it to the old ones either.
I pulled up the ratings on IMDb. United Kingdom, it says original rating was X, and then it was given a 12 on a video release and then a 15 on a video release. In
that order? It went from 12 up to 15?
I guess. It doesn't give times or dates. Okay. It just says video.
Because I'd expect it to be the other way around, where it was like, okay, they're a bit more touchy about it, so we'll say it's a 15. It's really a 12. There's nothing really that, bad in it. So anyway, he he drives her, and she takes him to like this, roadside bar, a juke joint, she calls it. I feel weird saying that. It's a super old school American thing to say, but that's what she calls it. And she goes in, she's drunk, and like the owner of the place comes out to him when she's on the phone and says, "Hey, she's barred from here. You can come back on your own sometime if you want, handsome, but she's not allowed in here." And when he tries to take her out, she makes a bit of a scene. The music stops playing. She kind of goes around and describes what juking is, which is drinking a little bit, driving a little bit, going to dance a little bit. And there's kind of a mixed reaction from the people in here. One of them's her brother, who's very drunk and is mad she's here. But some of the other guys are clearly just having a giggle at this blonde woman, dancing around suggestively. And this whole segment, which then ends up with them leaving and going to a cemetery, that's where she takes them next, and she makes a whole speech about all these dead people are saying live and all that. Ultimately, this leads to him going back to the store where he was trying to get a job, right? And I feel like this entire segment is kind of like, he is by going with her, he is almost flirting with the idea of just going that path, of just going that way. But when he sees how sad she is, when he sees she's literally kind of like being haunted by the dead people who never went anywhere, that he kind of sees what he doesn't want to be. He's kind of like, oh, I'm looking into my past right now and I'm seeing nothing but misery. I'm seeing nothing but sadness. Like, you're not happy. There's nothing about you that's happy. So he goes back to try and get the job that he originally was maybe, because it felt like he walked out on it. It's like, wait, aren't you going to try and get the job? You're just leaving? It feels like you're making a distinct choice here. But then after this experience with her, he makes the choice to go back.
Yeah. No, from a plot perspective, it makes sense. The theming for his own self-improvement and trying to do better. I like all that. But Carol is just such an intriguing character to me. The fact that after this scene, she is essentially written out of the movie, barring like one or two little pop-ins towards the end. I was so disappointed by that. I really like her as a character. And then one bit of that graveyard sequence you skipped over that I think is what got at the X is as she's convincing him, like they're just saying live, 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 and kind of giving this thing of like live life to the fullest, don't slow down for anything. She drops down to her knees in front of him and starts trying to unbuckle his pants.
Oh, of course.
And he has to stop her, and it's like, no, we're not doing that. What are you doing?
Yeah, she basically begs him as she's doing it as well. She's like, please. Again, it almost feels like much like her going to booze or whatever to like feel something. She's like, no, please just like, take me and make me feel something. It feels very desperate. It feels very, there's nothing romantic about it. It's very much, I just want to like forget who I am and lose myself in the moment. And I want you to do that for me. And he doesn't want to, right? And again, this is part of this feels very sad and pathetic, and I don't want to be this. So he goes back to try and do it straight, to go back to the store and get a job. And this front door is never locked, apparently, because he just walks in. And I was noticing this throughout the movie, that people just keep coming in and going, even after it's closed.
This is a small town in U.S. in the 60s. We didn't need locks on our doors.
Well, yeah, because the sheriff would just shoot anyone who does anything bad without any due process. So people are just too scared to do anything.
Make America like that again, I guess.
But when he comes in, it's lady who comes down, and no one's really here yet. Now, the husband's upstairs in bed, and she's like, "Who are you?" And this is kind of her first real interaction between them, where he tries to explain who he is. He tries to give this reference to his character and saying that he wants a job, and she's like, "Well, you're a stranger. I don't know if I can." And I think obviously the subtext of all this is that, yeah, she's not admitting it, of course. In fact, she actively says at the end of the scene, like, as long as you understand, all I want from you is a worker, and is basically saying, like, no funny business, like, I'm not looking for any like male attraction from you. I think the undercutting here, though, is that by the end of the scene, the reason why she's changed her mind somewhat is because she is attracted to how he speaks, and she is attracted to how he acts.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that the reference letter, he had never read it. You actually see him unsealing the envelope in front of her just to say, like, yep, see, I didn't mess with this at all. And he passes it over, and the letter basically says, like, he works for me for 3 weeks. He was a hard worker, but he spoke really weird. He kept on going off on these monologues about birds without legs. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, he's a fine enough worker. And she's like, that's not really a great reference. And he's like, no, it is not. Sorry.
Yeah, it's, you know, it kind of establishes this like almost awkward tension that is going to bubble as time goes on. But sure enough, you know, the next scene, time passes and he's in a suit and tie that she's made him wear.
It does feel very early on. I'm pretty sure it is just like next day, if not the first week at the very earliest. But there is one bit, the tension that you mentioned before, where he mentions, and this is actually mentioned earlier on, so it's a setup payoff sort of thing, of how he used to date this woman who was an osteopath, which as far as I can tell is just an old term for chiropractor. And he basically like leans in and like puts his hand on her shoulder and says, you know, if you're having trouble sleeping, I could work out some of those kinks in there. And she's like, that's a lot. You're doing a lot right now.
Yeah, well, without really saying anything, though, it's all played out mostly without words, right? I mean, he says obviously what he says about, oh, I can help you, but her reaction and then him kind of backing away is mostly without dialogue. It's just kind of the reaction. But you
can feel the tension there, yeah.
And it kind of feels like despite everything, I think the tension comes not from her feeling uncomfortable that he's suggesting this. The tension comes from the fact that she's kind of liking that he's suggesting this. Like that's you know where the tension really is coming from. And for the record, you never blame her once for like having a flirtation because her husband's a completely awful piece of shit. So you're never thinking, oh, this horrible woman's cheating on her sick husband. No, he's insufferable who thinks he can control her. It's like he's spiteful. Yeah.
If anybody watched this movie, saw the borderline assault scene happen, and then saw Marlon Brando saunter in and offer to give a massage, basically, and said, how dare she? I would be like, what world are you living in that you wouldn't do that?
Oh,
immediately in her position.
I got a comment recently on one like a TV episode review where someone agreed that a villain in the show was a villain, but then said, but why does this female main character have the right to be the one to give him his comeuppance? Is it like, why does the white man always get beaten by a woman in Hollywood? And I'm like, why are you turning this into this? So don't get me wrong. What I'm trying to say here is that someone will find a way to twist it so she's the evil monster in this, David. I promise you.
Oh, no, absolutely. I just imagine the person who commented that wants whatever it is that you were doing to just stop and turn into an episode of Law and Order SVU. How is that how all of these action shows are supposed to go?
Just wild stuff that I'm never going to entertain, for the record.
Nah, of course.
But yeah, so anyway, so it sets all this stuff up, and the relationship comes in, and you know, like Carol does pop up here or there as kind of this like force, and I think you can kind of see that Carol recognizes that there is some kind of attraction between Valentine and Lady.
I feel like everyone who comes across them after they've been alone kind of gets that vibe. They're like, hey, why are you alone with the clerk? And she's like, 'cause we work together. But they pick up on the vibes.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like, at least for the first little while, like she's trying to not do anything with him, even though there is that kind of like truth that, but why did you give him this job? It feels like deep down you kind of wanted something, even if you're going through the motions of pretending to yourself even that you don't. But you know, this is all good because I think some of my favorite stuff here in this middle part of the movie is like, you know, when we see the husband upstairs and he's like, so who is this boy that we've hired? Like, how much am I paying him? Is he handsome? You know, who is he? And he's like, why haven't I met him yet? And she's like, you never asked me to bring him up. It's like, that's a likely story. To the point where he eventually calls down himself to his own store and says, hey, you work for me, boy. Come upstairs so I can see you. And makes all these little passive-aggressive comments about how handsome he is and so on and so on. And you just get this really uncomfortable vibe that he probably thinks they're already at it, is basically the way he's thinking because he's so spiteful. But it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy because of like, yeah, you're driving her into his arms with every single comment you make. Yeah, absolutely. It's I don't want to spoil too much, even though we're in spoilers, but to see the evolution of his character, it feels so like horrible the way you see where he gets to in the end, but it feels natural. It feels like, of course, this is where this character is going to end up and what he's going to end up doing. Yeah. And one of the next times Carol comes into it is that she's actually outside trying to like get some fuel for her car, but because she's barred, they're not going to serve her. So someone runs into the store saying, I want to use your phone. I need to call that dumb brother of hers to come and get her because I don't want her around. And she's making a scene, and people are kind of even like coming up to like pull her out of the car. And Brando goes outside, sees this, and goes over and like, you know, picks her up. And, you know, it's very clear that he's still sympathetic to her, right? As much as she's kind of erratic and she's kind of a nuisance, he's sympathetic to her in a way that all these townsfolk are not. But not because he's like, interested romantically or wants to run away with her, even though she kind of, every time she's with him, she's like, hey, why don't we just leave together? Why don't we just go away? I mean, do you want her? Do you want that, you know, middle-aged broad, that old lady? Come on, we can go run away and be together kind of thing. Like, that's kind of the vibe every time she encounters him after that point in the movie. And then the other thing that happens here, which is the big kind of like development for Lady, is that we find out that her brother and her once had something. They once had a relationship when they were young.
Carol's brother and her, just to clarify your prepositions there.
Carol's brother, yeah.
You just said her brother and her had a relationship.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Carol's brother once had a fling with Lady, and you know, she doesn't want like the brother back in the store. She's like, I don't want to see him. But he ends up coming up to pick up Carol, and when he sees her, everything goes quiet, and he's like, Carol, go wait in the car, I want to talk to her. And he, like, we find out that he's been married with kids for years, so it's not like he's a single man who's like wanting this old fling to be reignited. In fact, Lady points out that he abandoned her sometime back when she was maybe 20 or something, maybe even younger, and says, did you know I was pregnant when you abandoned me? I was carrying your child. And he's like, oh, I didn't know.
I had no idea. And she's like, yeah, I didn't tell you. I was too proud back then.
Yeah, and she lost the baby. You know, she didn't have the baby. But, you know, this sets up a lot of stuff for her character. Obviously, a lot of these things kind of come back round in the story later on. But it starts to paint a picture of her past. And then obviously that gets much bigger once we start, you know, because she starts talking about how she wants to open this wine garden in the back of the store because it's this open area, and she wants to build it, and she's all excited about it. She gets very dramatic about it, and ultimately, after one of the encounters, I think it may have to be this brother encounter, if not another encounter with her husband, she decides to take Valentine out to her father's wine garden, because she keeps talking about, oh, my father had one like this, and that's why I want to build one, and she takes him out there. Notably, this is like right after she's talked to her husband, though, because the husband like looks down out the window and sees them leaving in the car and tells the sheriff, who happens to be his friend. They're kind of like peas in a pod. Like the sheriff's coming over and talking to him and stuff. And this is when they go out there where she gives like the backstory of what happened. Is basically her father sold wine to a couple of black people, which at the time was illegal, and a vigilante, she calls them the vigilantes, but a lynch mob, came to her father's place and burned down his wine garden because he'd done this out of revenge.
I feel like it is also important to mention that she is clearly of Italian descent, and the father was Italian as well, which obviously Italians were still treated with a bit of racism back then. It was a lot heavier than modern day. I
mean, I think saying descent's even a disservice because she's got a thick Italian accent, so I feel like she is just Italian.
That's fair. I can't say whether or not she was born in America or not, but yes, fair enough. She's very clearly Italian, but the father, there's a reference later on using some Italian slurs that I think make it clear that this sentiment of not seeing Italian as close to white as we do nowadays is something that's still very present here.
Yeah, I don't think I cut that, probably because I don't know what the Italian slurs are, so I'm not going to be mad at myself for it. But you don't have to tell me them, it's okay. But
no, it's 3 letters and it begins with W.
It's not clicking. I'll look it up after.
All right, fair enough.
I'm happy to be ignorant about that, I suppose. But yeah, so it's like, okay, right, but this is bringing in, because obviously you're remembering that initial character, you know, the homeless black man earlier on, and how people reacted to him. As soon as she says this backstory with her father, and that her father died trying to, like, you know, put the fire out, it's like, okay, this is really tragic. And then she specifically says, I really don't know, I hate this town, because every time I look around, I don't know which people who live here were a part of that. And given that her husband's a piece of shit and the sheriff's a piece of shit, I think we all just assume almost immediately, yeah, them. Like they're must be involved. It feels like they are.
Yeah, I was considering that to some extent, but it also, they don't really put like a timeline on it either of like when it happened. They just said it happened in the past. So like my mind kind of went to her being a young girl when it happened. And so I was thinking, you know, maybe only the oldest people of this town actually have a chance of it being one of them.
I mean, I got the impression her husband is at least like a decade older than her. So I think she could be, you know, maybe 10 or 12 when this happened. And then he's like swooped in, you know, 10 years later.
It's messed up, but yeah. Probably
it's messed up. It's messed up as hell. But it's all this kind of level of control. And because actually one of the things that Valentine and Carol were talking about after he sort of rescued her before in the scene with the gas station is she starts talking about how, like, because he's saying that he's trying to go straight, he's got a steady job, he doesn't want to leave. That's when she's still trying to convince him to run away. And she says, oh, you've taken off that snake skin and you've put on the blue prison suit, right? So that's what she calls him, says, you're a prisoner here, like all of them. And again, that ties into what the title of the movie is that, you know, like he doesn't really belong to be trapped here kind of thing. So I like that kind of like prodding at him. And then obviously like his connection to Lady kind of grows because we find out that she's kind of been in prison in this town her entire life. You know, with her husband, with what they did to her father, and she's like her one kind of like glimmer of hope is this idea of building the wine garden. It's like it really represents a lot to her, which is going to make the ending all that more tragic when it happens. Because this movie is a tragedy, by the way. Like nothing good happens at the end.
Yeah. No.
Just to be clear here,
they almost try to swerve it with you. They're like, oh, look, 5 minutes left in the movie, and they're talking about how much hope they have. Be ashamed if something happened to that hope.
No, not afraid not. Because I think it's after they go back here where she suggests, you know, where have you been staying at night? You could live here. There's this little like room off to the side where a nurse used to like stay behind the curtain. You could stay there. Why not try? And it feels like she's like starting to really connect with them, starting to really bond. And he kind of like very shyly agrees to this, where he kind of like repeats it a bunch, where he's like, I don't know. He's like, oh, go on, go take a look at the room. He's like, okay, I guess I'll take a look at the room. Like it takes a while for him to be convinced. And when she goes upstairs to like, oh, I'll get some linens and stuff for you, and she runs upstairs, he goes over to the till. Sorry, the register for the Americans.
Okay.
Right. I don't know. Do you know what a till is? Do you still call it that?
Yeah, I mean, I can get it in general. Yeah.
Well, but you've seen the movie, so you know what he does next, so you can get it easily. But like, I feel like people who are listening to me,
I still feel like I'd get it. I think most people would get it. Just say the tap to pay. Everyone would get that.
Actually, to be fair, when she refers to it later, she calls it the money box or something like that.
That's just weird.
The cash box. I'm like, well, that's a weird thing to call it. All right, whatever. That's old-timey nonsense. But he goes over and just like takes money out and leaves. And I'm like, shit. Like, and I thought, is this like a moment where he's like basically scared by the thought? Like, he's so close to having something like a real relationship that it's kind of terrifying that he's just ditching and going back to his old ways. And it feels like that for a couple of minutes because he goes to that juke joint. He starts gambling with that money. But at the end of it all, he gets a ride back to the store. I'm like, why is he back here? This is what, for the second time in the movie, it's felt like he's left, but something's like brought him back. And he comes in and he opens the till again and he starts putting money back in. At least what he took originally. Maybe he's multiplied it a little bit because he had a good night gambling. And she comes downstairs and says, what are you doing? Why are you in the till or the money box or whatever she called it? And he's like, I was putting back what I took. And things get kind of heated and it kind of feels like things are blowing up here a little bit. And this is actually ultimately the scene where they eventually do kind of have sex for the first time. You know, we get the dramatic moment at the end where the curtain, like she turns off the light in the curtain, but there's a bit of a build up to it where, you know, she tries to like slap him and he pushes her back away onto the bed and he kind of accuses her of like, you had intentions here. Like you say this bed was set up for a nurse back when your husband first got sick. But I looked in here before, there was no bed. Like you made a choice. Like you knew you were going to ask me this. You were trying to like trap me effectively. Like you were kind of concocting a plan as if that's even something nefarious. But like he feels like, oh, you were trying to like, you know, ensnare me in here kind of thing.
Well, I feel like the big part that has been going on, and we've been kind of glossing over it in here, is that he just wants to come in here, do a job, do whatever. And this is kind of going back to that stripper idea, is that him just trying to like sell shoes in this store these girls come in and they just start flirting with him, and they keep on saying like, oh, you know, you should come around town more often. You should come see us or whatever. And he doesn't play ball. He's very much just like trying to do his job, whatever. And they leave without buying any shoes.
If anything, he looks kind of like just like more flirting. Like these, like because this young woman's kind of smelling at him, and she's not even buying anything. And then lady comes downstairs during that scene and kind of says, "I'll take care of these customers." And then they just kind of leave like, "Oh, no, we only came in for the hunky man. We're not interested in you." However, one of the things the husband says when he's being passive aggressive when he first meets him, right? Because that takes place after this. He's like, "Oh, business has been up the last couple of weeks. All of our customers are women, I assume." Yeah, he was really prodding at him, like again, like, "Oh, you're this attractive man downstairs with my wife, and I can't get down there."
Yeah, but I think that's kind of what this sequence is here, where he's accusing her and doing all this stuff. Is I think he thought she was the one that wasn't going to feed him any bullshit. He was the one that could be like, "You're here to work. That's your only job." And even if there were some sort of spark between them, that it would be solely an idea of, we can separate that out and just be employer-employee. And this idea that the bed showed up afterwards, he immediately accuses her and does say like, "Yeah, you want me to do a little bit of extra overtime, wink, wink, wink. Like you want me to do some of that stuff." And I feel like that's kind of at the core of his character, where he has for so much of his life coasted by on just looking good and not actually having to do anything, that now that he's actually trying to make this transition, he's trying to be better about himself. He's still being put back into that same box where like he's kind of just given things, and he's kind of given this, but he has to be that kind of guy again. And that's where, again, it goes back to that idea, was he a stripper? Because it really feels like he was a stripper.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because the way he just assumes that you wanted me to work, like he sees this as part of the work, as part of the overtime kind of thing. Which, I mean, it doesn't need to be, like, he didn't have to have a history as a stripper or even like a male prostitute for that to make sense as the sentence, but it does, because of the earlier lines, it does make me think that, you know, he's viewing this as work because he has done it as work. And so, if not literally for money, then at least like, oh, I get to stay here because I'm having sex with whoever it is, right? So, but no, she gets obviously emotional, and I mean, even the idea that she had a photograph of a naked woman like above his bed, almost like putting him in the mood, like, hey, like, you feeling it? You feeling it?
I mean, it's behind the curtain. That's usually just the jerk off room, but whatever.
But you know, like ultimately, they do embrace, and she like turns off the light, and the camera pulls back behind the curtain, and that's kind of your like, hey, it's developing now. Like they are becoming something, and even though they both kind of try to resist it, and even if he's the one who's accusing her of trying to set this up, like he did do the whole "I can fix your back," and he did do the whole "touch my hand" bit. Like he's done little things that feel kind of flirtatious. Like he is using his charm and good looks to try and kind of sway her. Even if he wasn't intending it going any further, he's still using it in small ways. So it's like they're both kind of like lying to themselves in some ways and not accepting, and maybe that's kind of the sweetness of them actually finally accepting that they are both just into each other, is that like, no, this is actually more genuine, and we're not good at recognizing it because we've never had this genuinely before, perhaps. Yeah. So
yeah, no, absolutely. I think the fact that it goes from this sequence into some amount of a time skip, enough for them to, if this was the play, I guarantee you this was the split between Act 1 and Act 2. This is absolutely where we come back. We have a newly built set with the back of the wine garden and all that being built up.
That part's fair, but I feel like just from a time perspective, this is, like, usually that's halfway, right? Is the act break?
I mean, Act 1 is usually a bit longer than Act 2.
Okay.
Just a little bit, because audiences are willing to sit longer before they need a break, and then they're like, all right, let's wrap this up.
Because this is more like 2/3 or so into this, I would say.
Yeah, well, I also think that this has been expanded upon for the visuals, being able to do that. So odds are, for all the exposition and stuff like that, they were willing to show a lot more and sit in silence a lot more than would be typical on stage.
I mean, that makes sense, yeah. And yeah, we see that, you know, he's enjoying helping her with the wine garden. Things seem relatively happy. There's just this, you know, husband upstairs that's kind of this lingering presence. And there's a nurse now looking after him who gets very judgy every time she catches the wife, like, saying something she doesn't approve of, or, of course, eventually seeing her hug Brando. She's like, oh, you know, I've worked in this business for many years, and I've never seen a wife act like you, kind of attitude.
Yeah, I will say, maybe this is just me personally. I don't feel like they did a good enough job of establishing that the nurse was just showing up at this point, because I feel like the nurse has been there as long as he's been having problems.
No, they do actually. There's something earlier on that tells you there isn't a nurse, because the wife lady actually says, "Oh, like, you know, I can't give you this injection. You should really have a nurse to do this kind of thing." And he just grabs it and does it himself. So it does say that he's resistant to having a nurse around early on in the movie.
I guess I took that quote as she had gone home for the night and the shot still needed to be done or something like that. Like, she wasn't present or whatever, but the nurse was still on the books at least.
No, I think it was establishing that there wasn't one early on, and then after the time jump, when, you know, because they look up and we see that's the first time we see the nurses at the window looking down at them. The lady even says, "Oh, he's got a spy now." So I think it very much does make it clear that she's a recent addition to the mix.
Fair enough. I just felt like it could have been established a little bit more, mainly because of the big reveal that the nurse says at the end. It's very reliant on her showing up in the middle of these two acts.
Yeah, I mean, it was that obviously somewhere in the acts, in the act break, yeah, for sure. But obviously, like, there's a whole bit here where the husband's like, "I want to go downstairs to, like," and it's almost like, "I want to like show my dominance again," but it's like, my wife thinks I'll never walk down those stairs again. I'm going to go down there and show that I can still be a presence.
It's for the grand opening of the thing. Like, there's announcements going on like crazy, saying like, "Oh, this store, the beer garden's opening up soon." Well,
no, that happens to be going on, but that's not why he goes down, because he doesn't know about that. He goes down and he's like, "What are those announcements?" And he gets mad and then starts saying, "How much have I paid for that?" Like, you know, because he's like, "Wait, this money's mine. How much are you paying for this?" So he's like surprised by that. And obviously all this is going on, and eventually when he needs help and Lady has no interest in helping him, that's when the nurse starts getting really catty about her opinion about her. But yeah, I don't know, like, all of this part of the movie, I think, is where the tension starts to, you know, kind of crank up, because you realize that the husband is not, like, he's too bitter and too spiteful to, like, even give her a chance of being happy down there. And it's like, oh, can they get away with just, like, doing it under his nose? And she doesn't want to just leave, because there's definitely kind of a sense, especially once Brando gets, like, sort of threatened by the sheriff to, like, you know, "You better be gone by sunrise" thing. It feels like he is saying, "Hey, why don't you come with me?" I don't think he ever says that sentence, but it kind of feels like that's what he's implying. Like, I need to go because they've threatened me, but, you know, I'll call you, come with me. Like, you know, he kind of, like, implies that. And she's like, "I'm not giving this up. No, that's wine gardens, but I've been working on. This is my father's legacy. I'm not letting this town, like, take this away from me." Like, she's being stubborn because she's like got something to prove, kind of, you know?
Yeah, just to go back a little bit, during that sequence where the guy comes downstairs, the husband comes downstairs, that's where we get the reveal, because he gets so heated, he gets so pissed off at them, and he basically just starts chastising her and chiding her and saying, like, "Oh, you're just like your father. He's, you know, terrible guy, broke the law, whatever. That's why we killed him." And he doesn't even realize he said "we," but the wife picks up on it, just like, Did you just confess to killing my father and to being one of them?"
Yeah, he never says the sentence "we killed him," but he kind of goes into a lot of details, like, "Oh, we got a bunch of trucks and cars, we got a bunch of gasoline and coal, and we went up there and we burned it to the ground." So he says "we" like 5 times, because he sort of says it for every part of the process. He describes the entire process of going out there and burning the wine garden, and then she's like, "Did you say we? Did you just say we?" And he doesn't even deny it. Like, he starts walking up the stairs, he's like, "Damn right, I said we. Did I stutter?" And, you know, he's got up, and he ends up falling, of course, you know, on the stairs,
because he is at death's door. As much as he's coming down to do this stuff, like, he's still very ill. But that's where it gets into the thing of, obviously, this would give her some sort of reason to, like, get away, or at least be angry with him, to the extent where maybe she would consider it, which is why it's all the more this tearing up of her, of like, you know, he's going to die soon and then it won't be a problem anymore. But with the sheriff now coming after Xavier, the timetable is moved up. You need to make a decision now.
Yeah, because that's the thing. You sort of thinking, well, if they just sort of keep quiet until the husband dies, then there's not really that much of an issue. But of course, the husband is keeping an eye on things. He's being very paranoid and spiteful, and he's asking his sheriff friend to get in the way. And, like, and, you know, he he compares Brando's character to a black person in a town they're not wanted in. Right? Obviously, he's using a lot harsher language. Like, there's not really been, well, obviously on the Italian one, but there's not really been racial slurs up until this point. But once the sheriff starts talking to Brando, he starts just throwing them out left and right as casual language.
Well, it is a common parlance, not the slurs, but the common parlance of in America called a sundown town. And the idea is
I've heard of
people
this.
of other races don't want to be there after sundown.
Yeah, this is all your Crow Country, or Jim Crow Country, I should say, not just Crow Country. I learned about some of this when I was watching like Lovecraft Country, which sort of delved into some of that stuff and whatnot. But yeah, like he basically says, well, you don't exactly fit that description, but if you're still here by sunrise, you probably don't want to be.
Yeah. It's not that this is like a racial thing or anything like that. It is absolutely just the idea of, we have this quiet little still community. You came in and started making things weird. And even if the law can't prosecute you because you didn't do anything wrong, the people can, and they will.
That's the thing, though. It's not even that he made things weird for the town in general. He's just upset one person who's in their like key group. Like he's pissed off this husband who can just ask his friends to kick him out. They're a gang of thugs, right? That's what they are. That's what they always were. They have power in this small town, and they're going to wield it. And Randall at this point is going to, like say he has to leave. And I mean, even Carol, when she like comes over towards the end, like she's like, yeah, like they're kicking me out too. So what, why don't we just go? Why don't we just go beyond the river? You need to leave too. I heard you're leaving. She's obviously heard about this threat, right? She's heard that they're going to force him out. Maybe because her brother's part of this group as well, which wouldn't surprise me. Because the brother has a plantation as well. That was like a casual drop earlier on. So it's like, okay, all right, like we're really setting things up here. And you really get this feeling that either female character both represent, like one represents the normal town life, even though she's just as much of a victim of it as anyone is. And you've got Carol, who represents going on the run in freedom and like that old way of thinking. And it's not even that that's wrong per se. It's just that the main character's at this impasse where he's trying to like have more of a normal life and grow up a little bit, but he's been told that he's not allowed to have it by certain people. He's been told, no, you're not allowed to settle down here. You can't have this.
It's entirely just hinging on this idea of prejudice and everything that goes into that. This idea of you make a snap judgment about someone based off of something that either they are in control of, aren't in control of, doesn't matter. But whatever you learn about the person, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how they actually are. It's whatever perception you have, and you just hold on to that and make all your decisions based off of it. And obviously, prejudice is usually used with race, but in this situation, it's the fact that he was previously a drifter, a guy who committed some sort of crime, and he came in and they just see him as trouble, and they're not willing to shake that.
Yeah, and obviously, it's not a surprise that these people are also very racist, because it does fit along with that quite easily. And dare I say that maybe even this story, when it was written, wants to talk about those things, but maybe the newer story directly addressing it would have been maybe not allowed, but like wouldn't have been went down as well with a larger audience. So it's kind of this roundabout way of talking about this kind of prejudice.
Yeah, it's weird because obviously prior to this, you have 12 Angry Men, which does kind of deal with it a bit more directly. They do kind of talk about it in a little bit more direct terms rather than having this stand-in character and then do it elsewhere. But this was based off a play, which apparently was rewritten like numerous times before it got to its final form. So maybe in the original context that was written like early 50s, it was a bit more taboo to make it as direct as it was.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's varying degrees to this, and there's movies that are going to be a bit more riskier for their time period, and I think this is still relatively like hitting hard topics and like doing risky things for its time period, but there's also movies that are a bit more like extreme than this for 1960 as well.
I don't know. I get that it is of the time, but it does feel weird to me, the fact that they want to say something about, oh, we shouldn't be prejudiced against any race or any people, and then they use the most conventionally attractive white man ever conceived. Like, it's kind of a bit weird if you want to swing those punches that you don't actually swing it. Literally the only black man in this movie, barring I think there's one delivery man later on, is confused with a voodoo priest. Like, it feels a little bit exploitative in that way.
I mean, I like you say, I think that is very much of the time, as we want to address these topics, and maybe the people making the movie would love to go further with it, but they feel that they have to be limited by certain things. Maybe they wouldn't get funding if they just go outright. Because even, there's examples of this even like up into the 90s where it's like we're tackling some of these subjects, but without actually addressing them head on. We're doing subtext and other things. Yeah. Like there's definitely examples of that all the way up, and sometimes you use science fiction for it, you use aliens and stuff like that, and in some cases you're sort of tackling it here kind of around the edges as opposed to like head on. And I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with doing that sometimes. I agree that obviously it happened a lot because they felt they couldn't go any further with it at certain times, but I mean, obviously I feel like the intentions here seem to be quite well intended,
No, I don't think this is ever coming at it saying like the townspeople were right. Stay in your lane.
They're the villains. Like they are clearly the villains the entire time. In this
absolutely.
movie.
I'm wondering more so whether or not it's this idea of like actually trying to play on the race things, or if it's more a general concept of Tennessee Williams, whoever did the adaptation for the writing, kind of just could feel the wind, knew that that's the direction it was going in, and tried to make the characters who were more understanding, more of the future, more seeing the way, like less conservative, I guess, we're just more accepting of that rather than actually trying to make a point on it specifically.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, I think the way the story's handled, like it does feel like like I say, it makes them clear who the villains are by the end of the movie. So, it's easy to like kind of get behind it from a moral standpoint, what the movie's getting at. How much it, like the original writing wanted to say about certain subjects is maybe a little open for debate, but, it is what it is. I mean, the end of the movie, well, first of all, the nurse reveals that she can tell that lady's pregnant, and she knows it's not obviously from the husband, because the husband is in no position to be fathering any children. So it's like, okay, that comes back around to, they were literally just having the conversation with Brando, that Brando was saying he has to go. Now, admittedly, it's not his choice. He's been told to leave or he'll be killed, effectively. But this idea that he was going to leave while she was pregnant was mirroring her early life, where that brother character of Carol was going to leave her while she was pregnant and didn't know, and he almost didn't know and left. Very different circumstances, but there is kind of like a repetition there that is intentional. And then, of course, like they're, embracing, and they end up out in the wine garden, and she's saying how important it is to her, and that's why she can't just run away. Because, at this point, it's like, just come with me. Like, that's the idea here. Like, we can just go and be away from this cursed town, but she doesn't want to give up what she's built. As they're embracing and they're having a sweet moment, there's just like a little bit of fire on the roof of the wine garden, and we cut to the husband upstairs who's throwing out like bits of rag or whatever on fire onto the top of it. He's being so spiteful that, and obviously, once he started a fire, it's going to be, unless they catch it very quickly, it's just going to spread, because this wine garden, it's just a wooden structure with some tarp and stuff. It's not,
it's wood and paper as far as I can tell. Like, it is not something that is going to stand up to any sort of fire.
Yeah, so it just starts burning. And she goes running upstairs, and as she's running upstairs, the husband's yelling out the window, "That drifter, he's robbing my store, he's setting fire to it, send help." So he's basically trying to make it look like a crime, which again is very... Meanwhile, I was going to say that's right out of the playbook of anyone, like, think of witch trials, think of anyone who accuses a black man, like in the South. It's like, oh no, we'll just believe you, because we'll always believe you when you say something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And meanwhile, he's taken off his snakeskin jacket, which obviously is one and the same of his character at this point, and he starts using it to try to put out the fires. Like, that's him sticking around trying to make this all work while she tries to run upstairs to stop the husband.
And the husband shoots her. He pulls out his gun and like shoots her as she's going up the stairs. So I assume we'll also try and blame that on him. In the aftermath. This is all just a big frame job.
I mean, I don't even think it's going to need to be blamed on him. If the town is the way they are, I think they're going to be like, well, this business owner was just defending his life as his crazy wife tried to murder him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, either way, I guess what I'm saying, though, is that, like, because they're all in cahoots, it's like, well, we have to put something in the paperwork. So wink, wink, this is what happened. He was trying to rob and set fire, and you shot your wife, or maybe you shot your wife in defense. But either way, we all know exactly what happened, and we're all just agreeing to write down the official statement of this, and this, in case don't know, someone from out of town ever comes in and checks any paperwork or something. But it's all just kind of like wink, wink. We know what we're doing here. And they come in with some fire hoses, and instead of aiming at the fire like you would typically do with fire hoses, they just aim them at Marlon Brando. And they keep aiming them at him until he falls back into the now very much on fire, entirely, ablaze wine garden. And the implication here at the end is that he dies in that fire. So the wife has been killed. He's been forced into the fire and dies that way. And the actual final beats of the movie is Carol, who is now sad about all this. Her and the black homeless man are going through the wreckage, and the homeless man finds the snakeskin jacket and gives it to her. I mean, she says, "I'll give a gold ring for it." I feel like he may have just done it anyway, but she says, "I'll give you my gold ring for it." And he takes the ring, and she takes the jacket, and she puts it around her shoulders as she gets into her car, and presumably leaves the town for good. Like, she's going to go on and never come back. And the final shot as she drives off is the camera focuses on a bird, because earlier on Marlon Brando made a whole big speech about how there's some birds that'll just fly, and if they ever stop flying, they're dead. And that kind of represents him as a character, obviously, because the second he stopped moving, he died.
Literally the moment he started that, I'm like, wow, I wonder if this represents any characters and how they feel about their position in life. Could be anybody.
Well, I think that's what I was getting at before about the monologues being a little bit much. Is partly because they're so over the top, but partly because they're very on the nose. It's very clear who and what you're talking about right now. And then the ending, of course, kind of, calls back to it.
Right. So I want to bring up a little bit of mythology with you and just get your input on it.
Mythology?
Yes.
Go on.
Mythology. So the play that this was based off of is called Orpheus Descending. And the Orpheus is a Greek character. In the myth, there is Orpheus, and I always pronounce it wrong. Eurydice, I believe it is. Yes, not Morpheus, Orpheus. Very different.
I know.
So the character of Orpheus, he was a skilled lyre player, not guitar player, lyre player, who was constantly jovial, constantly having good times, whatever, until he came across Eurydice. Eurydice and him get married. They have a good life. Someone gets jealous and tries to take Eurydice as his own. They go running. Eurydice ends up being killed and is sent down to hell, Hades at that point in Greek mythology. He's super depressed about it. Orpheus then decides to go down into Hades, talk to the gods, and plays them a song that melts their heart. And the idea is he's allowed to take Eurydice out of Hades. However, he must do so without looking back at her. If he looks back at her before they get back up to the overworld, she will be condemned to Hades forever. And he gets right on the cusp of it, but he has so much doubt in his mind because he can't hear her or see her, that right as he's at the edge of it, he looks back and she's condemned to hell. So it's a tragedy, obviously, but the idea that it's Orpheus descending, you have the idea that he's a guitar player, whereas Orpheus is a lyre player. If the descending part is specifically saying this idea of the trip down, I think you have a lot of parallels with the idea of someone is jealous and ends up killing Eurydice because of it, and then he's kind of condemned in his own way because it's hell to live without her. And the fact that he was a jovial sort of man who just lived a party life until he came across Eurydice and then tried to settle down. So I feel like the back half, I don't really see a lot of parallels with, except for, and this is the part that got me, was as Marlon Brando is putting out the fire, Carol is yelling and shouting at him, "Don't go back in. Do not, just leave. Don't go back in." Because she knows what's going to happen, that the people are outside with the fire hoses. But he goes in anyway. And in going back, the idea that he looks back to see what happened with Val is something that condemns him as well. So I just noticed a bunch of parallels there with obviously the idea of Orpheus, and it's in the name of the play. So
yeah, I mean, that sounds like, probably based it on that. Obviously some things have changed. Isn't Mary, of course, but there's a lot of parallels there. I can see that. No, I mean, I think the larger ideas of the movie work very well. I mean, honestly, my only real critiques are sometimes the monologues get a little bit much, and it's just like, hey, let's watch Marlon Brando do his monologue routine for a couple of minutes here or there. Yeah, there's one with Lady, there's one that he has with Carol, but generally speaking, I think there's a lot of good tension in the kind of like the will they won't they as they're kind of brewing below as the husband's upstairs kind of like lording over them the entire time. There's good character development there, there's good atmosphere with that, and the ending is a pretty good tragic ending. You know, I don't really have a whole lot to say negatively, really. And you know, I know you're disappointed that Carol wasn't as heavily featured after her initial first chunk, but I think what she represented every time she popped up is this like possibility of going free, and you know, almost like maybe he was misreading it as like she represents my past, as we were kind of saying, but in the actual fact it's more like no, like this place will confine you if you let it, and like she's kind of this like almost like warning sign that he doesn't heed. It's kind of an interesting thing by the end as well. Like, yeah.
I mean, that's the explicit part of it where it's not like she's banned from the state or anything like that. She's banned from this town. The idea being is that we don't allow you to come in and share your ideas of freedom because we want to be able to lock those people down like this. Yeah.
And I think it's very clear as well that the sheriff's wife is not very happy. Like, there's a whole moment right before they do the whole threat thing. The sheriff's wife's kind of like stumbling down the street, and Marlon Brando just goes over to help her up to see what's wrong with her. And they just show up saying, "Oh, get your hands off the sheriff's wife. He was fondling her." And it's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
But it kind of feels like she's not happy. You know, the disillusionment over what they did at the start of the movie with killing the guy who escaped the jail cell. Like, she clearly doesn't feel comfortable with that. It kind of feels like she's trapped in this town with this sheriff husband. And she's not like a super developed character, but I think it's just a hint that other townsfolk are like this too. That there's people here who are in charge, and then there's people here who are just kind of held here because they don't have anything else to go to, and it's kind of a tragedy for them as well. So,
no, I think that I agree with everything you're saying in terms of it's got good tension, it's got all that. I in those points like the movie. The problem that I had is once you hit probably about the hour 15 mark, I feel like the chemistry between the two leads does not feel like it gets any more intense. It feels like it kind of plateaus at a certain spot. And even once they hook up, once it shows that they are in a sexual relationship with each other, they're having this affair, I still don't feel like it's there. It feels like these are still just two people who were maybe a little bit flirtatious, but not actually in this level of love with each other. And by the time we hit the end, I'm down for the tension. I'm down for the way it all wraps up. It's very well done, but I never got the feeling that these two are in love. So when they're talking about running away together, I kind of feel like Marlon Brando is just sitting there like, look, I'm only going to try for like 2 more minutes and then I'm going to bounce. Like, I really don't care that much if you come with.
I get what you're saying. I think I read that in the moment. Maybe I'm being charitable as like the chemistry is the way it is because it's kind of doomed. Or something, you know, like I was kind of like reading it that way. I mean, I kind of agree. Like maybe like a more of a character change in them, seeing them be happy a little bit for even just a few scenes might have went a way to like make you really care about their connection. I think the reason why it didn't bother me too much though is because I still kind of cared about what each of them were going through individually and what the ending's going to represent for each of them individually, as opposed to being like into the relationship itself, which maybe would elevate it though, admittedly. Like if I cared about their relationship on top of like who they are as individuals, that might elevate the movie into like amazing kind of status. But as it is, it's pretty good, and it handles everything very competently. So yeah, absolutely. I there's no point in this that I felt was ever incompetence. It just feels like it could have gone through an extra draft or two. That's really my only critique, but it's still a very well-made movie. I see in terms of how it was received in theaters, it had a budget of 2.3 million and only made back 2.1. So clearly it didn't do very well. It wasn't resonating with audiences that much, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of a meaningless thing though for a movie at this age, because like so many classics we think are big deals also did not make money when they came out.
Fair enough.
You know, Citizen Kane bombed, and it's the example everyone brings up when they talk about movies that define cinema. It did not do well, right? People didn't appreciate it till later, so that's not.
However,
weird.
I will say on the wiki page for this movie, it does say Brando's biographer claims it was the first Brando film to lose money. So it at least was a first in that regard.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I guess if he was a box office draw, this was maybe disappointing for the studios or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to comment on that. Just you know, I guess my point is just that, yeah, like tons of movies that we think of as important weren't actually successful at the time. That was very common, actually, when you look at a lot of them.
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing with like viewing art films after the fact. Like, there's so many art films that like have God knows how much money pumped into it, and then it ends up not making anything. And
obviously, I know this one hasn't hit that status of what's really important now, because obviously it's one we hadn't really heard about until we went back to it. It's just not something that's special about this, that it didn't make money, because like tons of movies that ended up great didn't make money. So, David, what are you rating The Fugitive Kind out of 10?
You know, I think I came into this a bit lower than I'm ending up at. I think talking about the themes and going through it, I think I am a little bit more positive. That's
always nice,
because I was so stuck in watching the movie as just being frustrated with their chemistry or lack thereof, and being able to zoom out once the movie's done, view it as a whole, see the different things coming together. I do feel a bit more positive than I otherwise would have. It doesn't make it any easier to get through, but I think that it is still a solid movie with a lot of points being made throughout. So collectively, I think I'm going to come down at a very high, but still under the 8 at a 7.5.
Okay. I think that's very reasonable. I think I may even be landing on the same score, despite the fact that I started off being... I think you just sound more negative when you're kind of in the okay range than I do, for some reason. But I do actually think I agree with the 7.5, in that I think that I just don't love enough about it to say it's great, even though it's very good at most of the things that it's doing. You know, it's good direction, it's got good performances, there's good solid themes. I like the ending. I think it builds to it very well, where it makes sense that this is what this bastard's doing at the end. You kind of like, yep, this works. But yeah, it's not in that upper echelon. It's not quite into amazing territory, because, you know, this director can do better.
Yeah,
this star has been in better. So, you know, which is not to say that you hold that against other movies that aren't as good, but it's not like just under them. It's like a good step under them. So, you know, I'll agree with the 7.5. I think it's pretty good, just not quite hitting great for me. So there you go.
So that does raise the question, though, of does it make the cut?
I think it inches in. I think saying that it's almost great is us saying that it is good, very good even. Yeah. I think it probably makes the cut. I think it is in there. I don't think it's cut. I think a 6 is cutting it close, where you're like, it's decent and it's kind of good, but like, you know, do we actually want to recommend it? I if you like classic movies, I think this is worth watching, and I think that's a very easy way of saying it.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, obviously not all categories, all seasons that we do are created equal when it comes to making the cut.
Of course.
Just looking back in the past, we have had a 7.25 average rating. I said 7.5, you said 7, and that was cutting it close. So it's not all things equal the same. But I agree. I think that this one makes the cut, but it is kind of more inching it closer to the boundary of cutting it close. It's not quite safely in the category, but still made it in.
Well, we have numbers for categorization, we have these categories for categorization, but I mean, in reality, it's more of a gradient. There's a smooth scale that you just have to put some signposts in at various points to say this is where things make it. But there you go. That is The Fugitive Kind. Next time, we continue our journey with Sidney Lumet with the 1962 film Long Day's Journey into Night. So another drama, I believe. But we'll be checking that out next week. So join us for that as we continue the season. Of course, you can support the Collector's Cut and all the shows we do in MailFuzz Movies over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, or become a YouTube member and get access to our bonus ratings rundown segments for each episode, as well as a monthly exclusive show called Extra Reels, where we review some of the worst things ever made. So if that sounds like a fun time, they're usually silly movies, of course, but you know, we have a hilarious time recounting and trying to make sense of them.
I mean, it's like a 50-50 split between that and just sheer blind rage.
Yes, yeah. It depends if we thought it was funny or if it was just like painful to get through. But if you're interested in that and supporting and helping keep the show coming, you can support us in either of those ways and get access to that. Of course, thanks to everyone who already does support us. It is greatly appreciated. It always is. Thanks to everyone who's enjoying the show and joining us every week. But that is us, so thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.